love me, Peter? He says, Lord, you know we're good friends. I want to love him unconditionally. Is anybody with me this morning? Why is it specifically that Jesus is asking Peter if he loves him? Okay? Understand this. Peter had gone out of his way to claim, Lord, no matter what happens, I'll love you more than all these guys. I'll go to the death. Even if it means to the death, I'll go to the death with you. How many of you remember that Peter even pulled out a sword and he cut somebody's ear off? It was a servant. It wasn't a soldier. It was probably an unarmed guy, but that was his way. That was his way. Okay? Go with me to Matthew chapter 26. Okay? Why is it that Jesus asked Peter if he loves him? Well, because Peter had gone out of his way to claim that even though others would turn, he would never abandon Jesus. Matthew 26 and verse 31. Then Jesus told them, this very night you will all fall away on account of me. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. That's an Old Testament prophecy come true. Verse 32. But after I have risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee. Peter replied, even if all fall away on account of you, I never will. Now, I want you to understand what's going on here. Okay? Everybody say southern. Everybody say northern. Jesus is crucified and buried in southern Israel, which is Jerusalem. And he tells them ahead of time, I'm going to have to go to northern Israel, where Galilee is. Because you boys are not even going to stick around. But you're going to go back. Not only to your whole way of life, you're going to go back to where you live in northern Israel. Are you with me this morning? And so understand, he's saying, I'll go ahead of you and I'll be waiting in Galilee. And that, are you with me this morning? He even tells them, I'm going to go ahead of you and I'll meet you back where you used to live. And Peter says, what are you talking about, Lord? Even if all fall away on account of you, I never will. I tell you the truth, Jesus answered, this very night before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. But Peter declared, even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you. And all the other disciples said the same. Verse 69. They've arrested Jesus. Now Peter was sitting out in the courtyard. They've arrested Jesus. He's on trial. They're beating him in there. John implies that Jesus can kind of hear what's going on. Peter can kind of hear what's going on, but he can't get in. And a servant girl came to him and said, you also were with Jesus of Galilee, she said. But he denied it before them all. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. Then he went out into the gateway where another girl saw him and said to the people there, this fellow was with Jesus of Nazareth. He denied it again with an oath, or in other words, he swore, I don't know that man. After a little while, those standing there went up to Peter and said, surely you are one of them, for your accent gives you away. How many of y'all know that different parts of the country, people have different accents? And it's the same. Northern people sounded different than southern people. Then he began to call down curses on himself, and he swore to them, I don't know the man. Immediately a rooster crowed. Then Peter remembered Jesus' words. Before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. And he went outside and wept bitterly. I want you to go with me to John chapter 18. I want you to go with me to John chapter 18. How many of you are still with me this morning? How many of you are hungry? Good. After the service, there's some good food that's on sale, and we encourage you, and it's all going to parking lot funds. Verse 15, John 18, verse 15. Simon Peter and another disciple were following Jesus. This is when he was arrested. Peter and that other disciple, okay, it might have even been John. He just doesn't want to mention his name right there. And they're following him with the crowd. He's not carrying the cross yet, but he has already begun to be beaten. Because this disciple was known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard. So this other disciple kind of knew the high priest and was allowed to go in, but Peter had to wait outside at the door. The other disciple, who was known to the high priest, came back, spoke to the girl on duty there, and brought Peter in. So Peter's a little bit closer now. You are not one of the disciples, are you? The girl at the door asked Peter. He replied, I am not. It was cold, and the servants and officials stood around a fire they had made to keep warm. Peter also was standing with them, warming himself. Verse 25. As Simon Peter stood warming himself, he was asked, you are not one of his disciples, are you? He denied it, saying, I am not. One of the high priest's servants, a relative of the young man whose ear Peter had cut off, challenged him. How many of you are there? You're here with, he's got all kinds of witnesses. I know that guy. He cut my cousin's ear off. Didn't I see you with him in the olive grove? Again, he hid his sword, and again Peter denied it. At the moment a rooster began to crow. I want you to go with me to one more, and I want you to go with me to Luke chapter 22. And I love what Luke points out right here, something very important that Luke points out right here. And I'll wait till you get there. Luke chapter 22 and verse 60. How many of you are still with me this morning? Amen. Luke chapter 22, verse 60. Peter replied, man, I don't know what you're talking about. Just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. Remember, he's now in the room, and the Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Wow. Then Peter remembered the word the Lord had spoken to him. Before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times. And he went outside and wept bitterly. How many of you know that when we deny him, that when we fail him, he's there? How many of you know no matter how far we try to get away from him, he's there? David says, if I make my bed in heaven, you're there. But if I make my bed in the pits of hell, your spirit is there with me. And so we have to ask the question, and I'm sure Peter asked this question, why did I do that? Why did I do that? Why did I do that? And we have to ask ourselves this question, why do we say one thing and do another? Romans chapter 7, verse 19, Paul gives us a good idea why. He says, the good for what I do is not the good that I want to do. No, the evil that I do not want to do, this I keep on doing. Anybody with me this morning? Is anybody with Paul this morning? So let me ask you this. Why do we, and I say we, say we're going to do something for God, and then we don't do it? Why do we say we're going to do something for God, and then we don't do it? Well, I've come to the conclusion that many of us, starting with me, have a bad heart condition. We have a bad heart condition. Okay? And I believe that many of us say we're going to do something, but we don't do it. We say we're going to do something for God, and then we don't do it because of this heart condition. Number one, when I talk about our heart condition, what I'm saying is our hearts are not set. Our hearts are not determined. Our hearts are not set. David said this in Psalm 57, verse 7. Lord, my heart is fixed. Oh God, my heart is fixed, and I will sing, and I will give you praise. How many of you know that you need a determined heart to come through with what you said you were going to do for God?